There is this quote that says a man has two lives. The second one begins when he finds out what his purpose is. You are experiencing a certain lifetime in your cycle. That is what we have been saying throughout this podcast.
We always talk about success. We talk about hustle. We talk about anything which requires struggle, right? If we all are going to die someday, right? What is that reason of doing this?
Have you heard of Neem Karoli Baba?
I was just going to say about that.
He's been known to be seen in 5 places at the same time. Have you seen visuals of him? Very normal looking person.
Welcome to the next episode of Conversations with G. As we thought for this time, I had planned very much during our last session, but this time, right now, I feel it's a good time. Like the atmosphere is good, and I have no plans. The only question or the reference point which I would like to drop to start this conversation is what is the reason of doing all this, right? Or in anyone's life, right? We always talk about success. We talk about hustle. We talk about anything which requires struggle, right? If we all are going to die someday, right? What is that reason of doing this? Why should I go through this much pain? Why should I travel this much every day, struggle myself and burn out myself in order to achieve something which is not going to be with me after I die? What is the reason of doing this? Why does this world function like this?
Well, obviously, that's a question that I have asked myself a few times as well. The general viewpoint of where I've landed right now, and my opinion is still forming and it could continue to change, is that there is a purpose upon which we have all been put where we are. We've spoken about being born to the parents that gave birth to us, etc. But there is a purpose. The true meaning of life is to find that. Right? And there is this quote that says a man has two lives. The second one begins when he finds out what his purpose is. Right? So the goal is to find your purpose. And it's not a search that will yield an answer or the results will come to a point where it will say, I have to create so many jobs or make so much money. It could be anything. But that search is what you owe to yourself. That search is what you owe to your existence. It is easier for somebody to say, I have been supported by my parents till a particular age. Now I'm going to search for my purpose and go live in the mountains and be where I am and just try and find it. It is not that simple. The purpose can also be found in the daily. And most people lose that perspective because they are caught up in the grind of what we call life. We all will finish school. Most of us will go to college. Most of us will get married. Most of us will have children. Most of us will have houses, jobs, etc., etc. It is almost being done by everyone. But what is the meaning of all of this? And in many cases where your first instinct is survival, which is the human instinct, you can only begin this quest once that is done. In Maslow's hierarchy, right? When you have your basics taken care of is when you can go to the subtle. But we owe it to ourselves to do that. So you have to search. In order for that, you have to cover the first 2-3 steps. You should have the time to even think. There are some people who spend the entire day trying to earn a living. What is their purpose? You ask them, they'll say, come talk to me later because I don't have time to talk to you. But there are others who have the ability to do that. And if you have that ability, you should consider yourself extremely lucky. Because your existence in the current life cycle is a result of multiple other karmic cycles. So if you are in a situation where you can actually figure out what that purpose is, that means this is the life that you have to use to do that. For many people, this may not be the life. It may be the next one, or the one after, or the one after. So if you have that ability, you have to do it. It's my personal view. And the path is always one of one's choosing. It could be a search that could lead nowhere. But the effort needs to be put. And we say this, there is this quote by, or question by Arjuna, who asks Krishna before the war. There are people who follow all the good practices, they are faithful, they are religious, they do all their duties, they don't do anything bad. They don't experience any good, or they don't experience any benefit of that in that life. They live pretty tough lives, they've struggled all their lives. So what's the point of doing all of this? And Krishna says you are looking at it in just a one view of X number of years. Whereas from where I see it, that cycle is, that 80 years or 100 years is just a minuscule part. Those people have the ability, or the ones who are born in the next life with a liberated mindset. They are called the Yoga Prashtas, the Ramana Maharishis who obtained enlightenment at 13. Mahaperivas at 8 or 10, he's inducted into the mud. He changes the course of humanity. Right? So nothing ever goes to waste. But you and I are conditioned to think that this 80 years means a lot. It does mean a lot, but it is part of a much larger cycle, a longer cycle. So in the yogic philosophy, the Purusha, which many other philosophies refer to as the soul, does not get liberated till it understands the true purpose. And it happens when the soul, the Purusha, sees itself. The Purusha is the seer. The Prakriti is the one that gives the experience. So this is the standard analogy of us going and watching a movie. There are people, or I'm sure you've been in a movie where you've seen a scene which is highly emotional. I'm sure you felt very sad or very happy. Has any of that happened to you?
No.
No. But why have you assumed that level of emotion? Because it has touched you. You are going through the experience. So, at a very deep level, life itself is that. The soul is there. It's watching all these experiences. Eventually, you're cleansing that experience. You're watching through a glass the whole experience of life. But the seer, the Purusha, can only see. It cannot judge. It experiences through the Prakriti. Eventually, through the practices, Ashtanga, faith-based, all of those, the glass is cleansed, and then it becomes a mirror. And then it sees itself. And when it sees itself is when you are liberated. So the goal is liberation. You may not, and I can say with certainty that most will not get liberated in this particular lifetime. But the goal is liberation. If that level of understanding has come to you, you are already blessed, in my view, because you are in a state that allows you to think that far and allows you to then do the practice. What we talked about, involution, pratiprasanam, guna vairagyam, guna jayam. That means you are taking control of your senses. Guna pratiprasavam, which means that you're changing the course, you're altering it or inverting it. If you have the ability to do that itself, you're blessed. In many cases, you may not be in control of that. It's not like Ramana Maharshi was planning to study for an engineering degree and all that. He was drawn to it. It was already in play. Karmic forces were already in play. But in a situation where you are seeing your responsibilities play out, student, employee, spouse, parent, homeowner, caretaker of parents, of your parents. At some point, if you have the ability to step in and say, what is the purpose of all of this? And how do I do this? You are already blessed. But it will not come to you just like that unless that cycle has picked you. For all of us, regular people as I call it, the effort goes on from a young age in terms of faith, in terms of prayer, in terms of meditation, in terms of practice. And then when it kicks in, it's a very beautiful journey. What is the purpose of all of this? Eventual purpose, according to me, is the liberation of the Purusha.
I think this, the analogy which you gave of, the Purusha is the seer, and you cleanse it till it becomes a mirror. I think that was the best ever explanation which I have heard in my small life till now. Have you read this book called Many Life, Many Masters?
Sure.
So then I would like you to, first, give the reference that what does the book say to the audiences, or let me do that, and then I will just ask your POV. So I came across this book in 2020. We were in lockdown, right? And that was the same time I myself started listening to podcasts. So this was mentioned in one of the podcasts, and I just downloaded the book and I started reading it. What the book says that it is written by a psychologist, where he has a client called Catherine. She comes to her and him, and her mental state is really off. She is into severe depression and many medications. He starts hypnosis. Now, during the hypnosis, the psychologist asks her to go back in time, to understand that what has gone in her life, which made her severely depressed. As she is hypnotized, and she is going back into time, she speaks about her childhood, she speaks about her boyfriend cheating on her, and etc., etc. Suddenly she goes into some era and speaks something which was out of nowhere. So the psychologist was pretty much confused that how did it came to her. And then when she goes back and back and back, she starts speaking about her previous lives. She starts speaking that, okay, I was there in this area of the world where maybe my current mother was my brother. I was a male then, I had a brother, I was killed in a war. And she also speaks which year it was, how was she killed, and she also speaks that language. And when the psychologist cross-checks after the session, it was 100% correct. So which came about that, okay, which proved that we don't have one life. The soul transfers from one to another.
Till it gets liberated.
So, how do you look at it? And, from whole this incident, this book which I read, it actually it was the seed of my spiritual journey, because that was the point when I got a hard proof that, okay, we don't have only one life. And I started exploring more. What impact did that story had in you, and what made you believe in the general karmic cycle which we talk about?
Well, I believed in this long before I read the book. So, for a lot of us, the validation has to come from a Western source. We are programmed that way. That itself is changing. We have talked about this for thousands of years. Has talked about it in the Bhagavad Gita. You will continue experiencing pain, pleasure, sukham, dukham, till you understand your purpose and get liberated. But the soul keeps making or going into a new life. It is for you to learn, but it is also for you to liberate. This book is a validation of this concept, but it has such a huge reception because it is from the Western world. Right? The fact that a lot of Indian Sanatana Dharma people call out this book is great, but how many of them know that this has been talked about in our culture for thousands and thousands of years? So I'm not putting the book down, I'm just saying it is true. So you are experiencing a certain lifetime in your cycle. That is what we have been saying throughout this podcast. And I firmly believe your place in this time could be 60, 70, 80, 100, or how many years. But you are put in a certain spot based on what you have done, and your accumulated karma is what this particular lifetime has determined for you. What you do now could either cleanse the dirt, improve your situation, or do neither. Or you could begin the quest for liberation. So when people say, anyway, it's all predetermined, what does it matter what I do? Yes, it does, because then the eventual goal of liberation is either you're closer to it or you're further to it. You're never stagnant. You're closer or further. So this book validates all of that thought process. The fact that this lady can go back and not only remember at great length, she speaks in the language and she quotes the dates very clearly, which means that his hypnosis actually extended beyond the time frame he wanted it to. And it was not planned. So it goes back. There are people in India who you can go to, and they actually will go into this trance state and ask you questions about your past, which will absolutely make you go, you won't even understand. They will say your father's grandfather's name was X. He is upset that this particular rite is not being done, or rituals are not being done, or they are very happy with this aspect of where their lineage has landed. And they will quote from your past with just taking your date of birth. So they don't know your name, they don't know anything. They will go into the state of trance and they will go through your lineage. And they can go back many years. So this is a practice that's been going on in India for a very long time. So they can actually go through your lineage. For you to understand your goal of liberation, you will end up going through some of this. You may not go to the depth as which this lady is gone. You may not go 3, 4, 5 lifetimes. But you will, that is what we call inverting that process. The cycle of evolution becomes involution. You're going inward, which means that you will go and you will see some aspects of your life which you have never viewed. Your eyesight is now this way. Which, when they say the pineal gland is activated, the kundalini rises. These are all heavy topics which I don't want to make people feel Like there is a lot to download. But when it goes in, you start understanding exactly why you are born here. That's when people go into this aspect of involution, they will appear as though they have no emotion. Because they'll say, okay, dad, mom are also dad, mom, but I'm part of this cycle. So you understand the process, each Purusha, the role and the direction and the travel of your Purusha. So you are beyond all of these things that happen at a pain, pleasure, experiential level that we attach so much importance to right now. So you also need to have the mental and physical strength to go through this. Most people who don't go through this or go through this and have severe issues are sometimes mentally referred to as schizophrenics because they talk to themselves, right? So when we talk about it is now offered as a course, which I find shocking, Kundalini awakening. You need to have the strength to awaken that. And it does not happen over 30 days or 60 days. Your chakras have to align. Ida and the Pingala have to come together into the Sushumna Nadi. And then the Kundalini will awaken. It's a very powerful process. If you don't have the physical or the mental strength, you will actually disintegrate. Which is what happens. Somebody goes into a higher level of meditation, they are not able to handle it, and the body can't handle it at all. They are termed as mentally unstable, schizophrenia, all of those aspects. So we don't need to do that level. All I'm saying is, you are in part of a cycle. This is your current birth. You owe it to yourself to do the search. Let it take its path. You may achieve 1% in this life, or 10% in this life, or nothing in this life, but you will move further ahead. So you will begin your next one at 0.10%. You won't begin at 0%. Next life, you may begin at 50% already. And then at some point, you say, okay, I know the purpose of this. Then your Purusha is liberated. That experience is now available for the next Purusha to go through. So the cycle is real. Why do we always say this? Why do we go through this process saying there are many things that I cannot explain? Why do we go through this saying somewhere something has happened, that's why the stroke of luck happened or the stroke of bad luck happened? Because it is beyond human comprehension. But if you go to a very realized person, they will just look at you and know your entire lineage, what has happened. They'll say, okay, fine. Because they cannot reveal the extent of that karmic cycle to many people because they cannot handle it. The question that I used to ask is, if Ramakrishna Paramahamsa or Mahaperiva, Chandrasekhara Saraswati of Kanchi, knows everything, why can't they stop the bad? Right? They know there's a drought. Why can't they bring rain? And he's done it. They don't alter the karmic cycle at all. You have to allow it to play out. Right? But they know what's going to happen. They know how it is going to happen. They know why it is going to happen also. Not just now, but in the future. That is a realized person. So you are in the constant state of absolute bliss, consciousness. When Ramakrishna Paramahamsa showed that moment, Vivekananda, because he was always asking, what is this state of? He was in a daze that all his co-disciple said, "What's wrong with him? What happened to him?" He said, "I showed him what it was." And then Vivekananda actually comes out of that. He says, "Please don't do this again. Please don't ever do this to me again. I would like to experience it on my own. I want to achieve that state. I don't want somebody to take me and put me in there." He just did, they can just touch you like that and you will slip into that state. That is how powerful it is. There is a Swami in Tiruvannamalai who was very famous for always used to have a cigarette. He was one of the most realized souls. His name was Yogi Ram Surat Kumar. He's extremely famous. Tiruvannamalai, near whereabouts, everything. You just ask Yogi Ram Surat. You will hear thousands and thousands of stories. So there was this writer who was an atheist, a very famous writer. He kept saying, "What is this state? What is this thing that you're talking about? You're always in Ananda, Satchitananda level, consciousness, etc." So this person just does this. He just runs his hand on his back like this. This person collapses. He's drooling. He's in a fainted state. He's like that. There are pictures of this. After that, all he writes is only about God. So he says, "I experienced that state." So it is real. And when you experience that state, you will stay there. Your Purusha is liberated. You are brought, or you decide to stay on earth, or if we call it earth, because you are required to help liberate a few more people. That's why they are here. They don't need to be here because they've already gone. I wouldn't even call it next level. They've achieved the goal. They are here to help illuminate others. The Thai Babas and all that. He used to sleep. He was 6 feet 6 inches tall. I'm talking Shirdi. So 6 feet 6 inches tall. Have you seen in villages they keep the babies in that little thing they tie and keep? He used to sleep in something like that as a 6 feet 6 inch person. It was 8 or 10 feet above the ground. How will you get into it? Just imagine that little thing hanging about 10 feet above. How will you get into it? It's just a little hut. They don't need to travel anywhere. They are there. They don't need to, they can be present in 3, 4 places at the same time. There are so many stories about all of this. People will say, "Well, I saw him in Uttarakhand." Another one will say, "Oh, really? This morning he was having breakfast here or doing that." Not just with him, with many people. These are realized people who've achieved that state. So you get that power, or we call the siddhas, the siddhi, the power. You can alter things. You can alter your presence. You can do anything. You can go faster than the wind. That is the power of achieving the state. Have you heard of Neem Karoli Baba?
I was just going to say about that.
He's been known to be seen in 6 places, 5 places at the same time. Have you seen visuals of him? Very normal looking person. He has transformed so many people's lives. And anybody who went to him would say, "What do I do? I'm unhappy. What do I do?" Serve people. What do I do? I'm okay. I want to do something. I'm fine. I want to go towards God. Serve people. You have a kitchen, puri and aloo is done daily. Go and serve everyone. Serve people. Servitude is God. You don't have to go to the temple, give lakhs of rupees, Serve people. Love everyone. That itself you'll find your purpose. So, and people are going with all these questions, great questions, deep questions, and you will say, serve people. And that's how he would say. And people would do that because the way he said it and because he was such a realized soul, people would just blindly follow because of the aura that came from him. That is the power of a realized soul. So the goal is at least start the search. If you have the ability to start the search, you're blessed. Start the search. And it could lead you to anyone. There is now a new, at least on Instagram and other social media, there is another Siddhar, as they call it in Tiruvannamalai, who just takes stuff and gives it, throws it like that to people, and people are just falling at his feet to pick it up. Tiruvannamalai is one of those places where you go in and that frequency vibration that we talked about, it'll hit you as soon as you enter the town. There's an arc as you enter the town. The minute you start driving in, I will start getting, and it's not like I had that belief for a long time. The first time I went to it, I felt that vibration, that walk around the hill, the Girivalam. You'll see so many people. And you could just look at some people and you will just feel a sense of calm over them. They're just there, they exist. So if you have the ability to begin the search, you are blessed. But it is your duty to do the search, to find your purpose in this karmic cycle. And you may be further along, behind, all of that, but you have to start. My view is that if you have the time, you have to do it. You have to allocate the time to be able to do that. If you have the means, you absolutely have to.